Good evening all, and welcome to the press conference following the Eurogroup meeting. President Donahue will debrief us on the main outcomes of today's meeting. He'll be followed by Commissioner Paolo Gentiloni and ESM Managing Director Klaus Rέgklingg. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria, and good evening, everybody. We had a very full agenda here today in Luxembourg, and many important topics were discussed. And of course, it's great to be able to do it in person with all of our colleagues. The euro area economy continues to be bouncing back strongly. Recent data releases show that the euro area is indeed doing well. The Delta variant, of course, has been and does remain a health challenge for our health systems, but thankfully we have managed to keep hospitalisation and death rates down. But of course, every life lost, every single person in hospital is still one too many. But we have seen really important health progress, and the economic recovery has stayed on track. The growth that we are now seeing, the continued policy support we have in place, and the recovery funding that is now flowing is indeed the best medicine there is to help firms and households to recover from this economic crisis. But of course, economic policy is never straightforward, and in these extraordinary times we now have to monitor many different issues. Over recent months, the highest priority issues were virus variants, vaccination progress, and finding safe ways to reopen our economy. These, of course, are still key concerns, but they are also accompanied now by other issues. One of those is energy prices, which have increased recently and which, of course, entail wide-ranging economic and social consequences, and we within the Eurogroup appreciate the issues that these higher costs create for businesses and for citizens. So to help us get a shared understanding of these developments, I invited Christian Zinglersen, the Director of the EU Agency for the Cooperation of Energy Regulators, to make a presentation and to inform us on recent developments and prospects. The issue of rising energy prices is broad and it is multifaceted. Our exchange of views today focused on the consequences for inflation and for budgetary policy within the euro area. There are also many other viewpoints, such as, for example, with regard to energy security, which belong to other ministers and to other council configurations. So to give you a sense of today's discussions, we all concur with the Commission and with the ECB that a significant part of current developments are likely to be temporary and that inflation should start to fall again next year. However, of course, there is the human angle, and today's discussion showed a shared awareness of the need to address the social impact of the current price spike and the need to protect the most vulnerable households from energy poverty through targeted measures. But the most vulnerable are not the only ones affected. This is an issue that is indeed touching all Europeans, citizens and businesses, and in particular small and medium-sized businesses. So that's why we agreed on the need to monitor the evolution of energy prices and to factor this into our budgetary policy making to ensure it doesn't compromise the recovery that is now taking hold. We were in full agreement today that the current situation does not undermine our ambitious climate objectives. The green transition is not the problem, it is part of the solution. We need to maintain and find opportunities to speed up our efforts to improve energy efficiency, develop renewables and low carbon sources of energy, so as to reduce our reliance on imported energy. So overall, we had a good discussion on a relevant but very complex issue. This is clearly not the end of a process. Given the complexity of the issue and the role of other councils, further work and discussion is required, and our exchange of views will feed into the important work the Commission is currently carrying out in identifying areas for further common action on tackling further rising energy prices. And of course, this is an issue that is not limited to the euro area, which is why I am coordinating closely with my Slovenian colleague and current holder of the President of the European Union, Andrej. Our second item was also on the economic situation, in particular with regard to exchange rates. It's standard practice for the Eurogroup to get a shared understanding of exchange rate developments ahead of the IMF annual meetings, which will start in about a week's time. Our third item looked at the implementation of euro area priorities in the recovery and resilience plans. We've already acknowledged the importance of recovery funding for healing our economies after COVID-19, but it's also critical for addressing long-standing reform and investment priorities identified in country-specific recommendations and in the euro area recommendations, and thereby promoting the convergence and long-term growth of our economies. Our discussion today highlighted that Next Generation EU is providing a real boost to investment and reforms, but we have much work to do individually and collectively to move forward by Banking Union and Capital Markets Union. We also discussed the 11th Enhanced Surveillance Report on Greece. We're very much aware that the pandemic has had a large impact on the Greek economy. This has affected the implementation of some reforms, but we remain positive with the progress that has been made. Finally, together with our colleagues from Croatia and Bulgaria, we invited the Chair of the Supervisory Board of the European Central Bank and the Chair of the Single Resolution Board for their regular updates on their recent activities and their assessment of progress regarding the financial sector. They touched upon important topics such as the structural transformation of the banking sector, the adjustment of business models driven, for example, by digitalisation, as well as progress made on the resolvability of banks in the banking union. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, and good evening. Well, first of all, on the economic situation, as Pασκάλ just said, I think that the outlook remains a positive one. As you know, we had in the euro area a robust recovery in the second quarter, and indications are that the third quarter will likely confirm this positive trend. So optimism and positive outlook, but at the same time developments that require close attention. And among these, the interplay of rising energy and commodity prices, supply bottlenecks and booming consumer demand that are likely to maintain upward pressures on consumer prices in the short term. And this is the reason why monitoring of inflation remains crucial. You know that we had in September 3.4 inflation, and this, if you look to July, August, September, shows an increase. Our forecast is that this will continue in these months and decrease in 2022. This is the reason why we consider temporary this inflation increase, but monitoring it will remain essential. We discussed very much, as the president of the Eurogroup said, about energy prices, wholesale prices of electricity. The surge of this price is due to an extraordinary combination of factors. The most important of this factor is the high demand, global high demand of gas, coming especially from Asia, and the insufficient supply. So natural gas prices are determinant for electricity prices in most EU countries. To a lesser extent, electricity prices have increased due to seasonal and one-off factors, weather conditions, infrastructure maintenance that was delayed due to the pandemic. A third factor has been the increase in the carbon price under the EU ETS, but this represents only around 20% of the overall electricity price increase. This tendency also is considered a temporary one, but of course the seasonal winter condition will be essential, as Christian Griesener told us, to understand how this temporary, how long this temporary will be. Now, in this situation, the Eurogroup was very interesting, I think, because coordination is key among member states in the response to this crisis. Several member states, as you know, have already taken steps to response, and the Commission will shortly present a toolbox of policy measures that can be deployed to mitigate the impact. It is important, in my view, for measures to be temporary and targeted, to respect the single market and state aid rules, and crucially, measures must be consistent with the transition to a decarbonized economy, which is the structural response to volatility and dependency on fossil fuels. This is not to under-evaluate the need of a response and of a reaction, which is completely needed, but to stress the fact that the European Green Deal is not the problem, but it is an important part of the solution here. We also need to enhance our preparedness to similar shocks in the future. Alongside the toolbox for the short term, we will also launch a reflection on how to better secure energy supply for EU citizens and businesses in the medium term. We also discussed how our common euro area priorities are reflected in member states' recovery and resilience plan. You know that we have now approved 2/3 of them. And just to recall, the euro area recommendation this year centered on ensuring a positive fiscal stance, avoiding divergence, and moving forward with structural reform. So it's positive that these three aspects emerge very clearly from member states' plans. The ambitious reforms and investments in the plans will support the recovery through increased public and other capital spending. They will limit the increase of divergence that was one of the main concerns that we had when we launched the recovery and resilience strategy, by supporting in particular the most vulnerable and hardest hit member states, and they will increase economic, social, and institutional resilience. So now we are finishing the negotiations and evaluation of recovery plans, but firmly already in the implementation phase of the recovery and resilience facility, because of the fact that the majority of member states' plans are already approved and the money is flowing. Finally, a word on the enhanced surveillance report for Greece, the 11th report. As you know, Greece is seeing strong signs of economic recovery, supported by the gradual reopening of the economy, and all in all by a quite good tourist season, despite the terrible fires that hit the country in August. The report concludes that Greece has delivered on a number of specific commitments, in particular around privatization, tax administration, education, and public administration. We are expecting further progress this month, especially in the areas of primary health care and justice and arrears, which we will assess in the 12th Enhanced Surveillance Report later this autumn. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much and good evening. Just a few points from the ESM perspective. On the first agenda item, economic situation, energy prices, you already heard a lot. I think it was an important discussion. I informed ministers about the thinking in financial markets. Markets continue to have very positive growth expectations for this year and next. However, markets always focus a lot on energy price developments because they remember from the past that energy price swings often have a very significant impact on the world economy. But at the moment, like what you heard, also markets are looking at price as the increase in energy prices as a temporary phenomenon. Therefore also the impact on inflation they consider to be temporary. And that is particularly the case because second round effects in the labor market are just not visible at all. Certainly not in Europe, maybe a bit more in the US and in the UK. However, there is a concern that the supply shock is not limited to gas and electricity, but can be broader, oil, but also other commodities. And certain commodities like metal need a lot of energy to be produced, so there's a direct link. And that over time could then have a negative impact on growth. So that is discussed in the markets. Some even make estimates that this could lead to lower growth in Europe of between 0.2, 0.3 percentage points over the next 12 months. This is a view that I hear from time to time. But at the same time, this is against the background of strong growth on the one hand that will automatically from now on decelerate as we see in all official forecasts after the strong rebound recently. On the 11th Enhanced Surveillance Report for Greece, this is of course always particularly important for the ESM, given our role as the strongest creditor, the biggest creditor of the country. You heard about the main findings of the report. I agree with that. Greece has indeed made good progress on reforms. There are always things that we look at particularly carefully because there are weaknesses, arrears, developments were mentioned. Debt levels are higher today than they were before the pandemic, not surprisingly. It was absolutely necessary, but that means we have to monitor that very carefully. But at the same time, at the moment, Greece is really doing well. Growth seems to be much higher than we thought until recently. NPL reduction continues, privatization continues. So all that is very positive, and we will return to this towards the end of the year. A last word on banking union and the update we received from the institutions. As you know, we are preparing everything to have the backstop for the SRF ready by the end of the year. We have worked very closely with the SRB to make that possible. I could inform ministers that everything is on track. All the legal documents are agreed. and we have a great cooperation here with the SRB. Of course, to make it happen, the ratification of the amended ESM treaty needs to be in place by the end of the year. So far, about half of our member states have either fully ratified the amended treaty or are very close to that. The other half still has something to do over the next 2 months, but I'm confident that we will get there so that the backstop can become effective in January 2022. Thank you.
Okay, you can hear me. Ooh, I'm not tall enough. Maybe one question first for the Commissioner. How has today's debate informed what the Commission is going to produce in your toolbox? We've been hearing a lot about the toolbox, but is it already clear that for some member states the toolbox will be insufficient because what they're asking for is actually a common EU response, which seems to be beyond the remit of the toolbox? And perhaps you could talk about one specific demand, which seems to be from France and Spain, about how the EU conducts its electricity pricing and the fact that the way the system is structured might be increasing the costs, and whether there's any plans for the Commission to propose a change or to revisit something like internal energy pricing rules. And then one question for the President of the Eurogroup. What role do you foresee for the Eurogroup in this debate, given that a lot of the policy areas don't actually touch on the remit of the Eurogroup? And if anything, it seems to be more of a ECOFIN issue, given that this concerns the 27. Thank you.
Well, okay, we use the word toolbox. Toolbox means, first of all, in a communication that will take stock of the origin of this crisis, characteristic of this crisis, temporary, non-temporary, things that we have discussed also today. We will clarify the tools that are available for member states for their response to this situation. The tools that can be used according to the EU laws and respecting the EU rules, single market, state aid, what member states can do with this response. At the same time, I think there is a work going on to try to identify also further proposals that we are working on issues like that were also raised in the discussion among ministers here. Can we play a particular role in procurement of gas? Can we adopt new initiative on storage of gas? These work streams are going on. It's too soon, I think, to understand how we will table these proposals. Probably part of this proposal will be in the communication and others in a new energy package that we will present in December.
Mary, thank you for your question. So an ongoing feature of... Maureen, thank you for your question. An ongoing feature of the work of Eurogroup is to assess macroeconomic developments that are relevant to the work of ministers. One of those key indicators is inflationary trends within the euro area, and it was clear to many of us that in order to have a comprehensive discussion about inflationary trends, it was important to recognise the contribution that recent changes in energy prices have had on price levels within our economies. In terms of the relevant policy actions, you're correct that any economic policy action that has a legislative role is, of course, a ECOFIN area of competence. and I met Andre, who is the chair of ECOFIN, this morning, and we discussed how we can coordinate activities with regard to that. Overall, however, it did become clear in the discussion of Eurogroup that many of the policy actions that are capable of having an impact on this sit across many different council configurations. So the key way in which our activities will be coordinated will be in the run-up to the European Council, which will be taking place in October, and the discussion that we had in Eurogroup today, and the further discussion that we will have on overall economic performance again in November, will be helpful inputs, I believe, to the European Council in October and the other one again in December. So if we're going to assess where we are with inflation, we have to be cognizant of what's happening in energy pricing, but we all agree today that the policy responsibility for this sits across many different government ministers and many different council configurations.
I'll take a question from Naomi.
Thanks very much. Yeah, just a quick one for the Eurogroup President. Mr. Donahue, you've received a new draft of the OECD tax reform proposals. Can you say if the words "at least" still remain, as in at least 15%? And will we have a deal on Friday? Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Naomi, for that question. And as always, when I get questions on corporation tax, I need to make clear that I'm answering those questions as Minister for Finance of Ireland and not President of the Eurogroup, and that is regard to all matters in regard to taxation. I did indeed, as did all other members of the inclusive format of the OECD, receive a new text in relation to efforts to reach agreement on corporate tax reform in the coming days. I have to brief the Irish Government on that text first. I'll be doing that on Thursday. And in the aftermath of that, the Government will then make a decision in relation to the OECD process. So I'll be able to answer questions on that text once I've briefed my Cabinet colleagues. We are making some progress, but there is a need for further engagement, but with the OECD, with the Commission, all of that is underway. And the Government will form a view on this matter later on in the week. And at that point, I'll be in a position then to confirm the Irish position on this important matter.
Hello, it's Maria Psara from Start Event Εφημερίδα των Συντακτών Greece. I have two questions. Actually, one follow-up to Mehrinkan's question. What was the mood in the room when you discussed the proposal from France and Spain? And Commissioner, would we expect to see some ideas that were discussed today in the toolbox that the Commission will present? And the second question is on Greece, of course. The Greek government seems to be more optimistic than the Commission about the growth this year. The Prime Minister said his forecast for 5.9% for 2021, while the report insists on 4.3%. So my question is for Commissioner and Mr. Rέγκλινγκ, are you optimistic that this figure could be revised upwards? I think that Mr. Rέγκλινγκ said something like this. And which are the key priorities for the next report, which could lead to the disbursement of the profits of S&P and ANFAS. Thank you.
So in terms of the mood, I mean, there continues to be a mixture of both optimism and determination within the Eurogroup. Optimism that we are making progress with a rebound that is turning into a recovery. All of this is informed by the information that we are getting regarding the performance of our economies. And if we look at the progress that we have made in this year alone, we believe we are making progress in healing our economies, healing our societies, and we now have the recovery fund and the recovery plan that has been created and implemented by the Commission and by Commissioner Gentiloni, that is now arriving at exactly the time we need it. So there is a real mood of determination amongst all of us to continue to lead this recovery and a belief that we can. Of course, that mood of optimism is, of course, then influenced by new issues that occur. And we are all aware of the challenge that developments in energy pricing can pose. We know the impact they can have on living standards. We know the impact they can have on the performance of companies, particularly smaller companies across all of Europe. And we're all looking at what role we can play to support them in dealing with this challenge. We didn't get into an exchange of views regarding the different proposals that were put forward by different ministers. Many different ideas were put forward. A very large number of ministers contributed. We all listened to each other's views. And now as we get ready for the European Council in October, as the Commission get ready to bring forward their proposals, I think the exchange of views today, I hope, will help with that process, and I believe that it will. The issue of inflation, the contribution of energy to that, is one that we will, of course, be coming back to, but the mood continues to be one of determined optimism that we can lead a recovery that will make a difference to the lives and living standards of people within the European Union.
Just one word. The Commission appreciates, of course, the proposals that were circulated by member states, France, Spain, Greece, and these are among the issues that we are discussing in view of this toolkit and communication. Of course, you know that there are also differences, but we were very positive in the appreciation of this proposal. Well, as far as the economic forecast, this is not only for Greece, of course. You may remember that our recent forecast was a 4.8 growth for this year in the EU and in the euro area, and you know that several member states have now more positive assessment. I will present the autumn forecast beginning of November, and we will see. But
if I can add to that, on Greece, there indeed the most recent indicators are positive. Therefore, I'm not surprised that the Greek government has revised up its own forecast quite significantly. The tourism season since July has been very good. The first few months of the year not, but since then very good in August and also September. But also on industry we have good numbers. So I wouldn't be surprised if growth will be in the end somewhere around 6%. Then your question on the next report, of course it will be linked to S&P and UNFA profits, but on substance the work will be done like for other reports, assessing progress on reforms. But I think we will also have to look into the debt sustainability analysis again, the fiscal strategy obviously for next year and beyond. That will be important, also particularly from the ESM perspective. And this is not because I see any differences in view between the Greek government and the Commission and ESM and the institutions, but because it's very difficult to come to good assessments given this very unusual nature of first the strong downturn last year, now the strong recovery. We don't have really experience with such a business cycle. So it's just very important that we sit together and come to a very good assessment on these very important issues for the future of the Greek economy.
Thank you.
Consul from Moscow News, I would like to ask another question concerning the proposals that have been made by some member states, France in particular, Spain, the Minister Le Maire said very clearly that what France is asking, and Spain also, is a clear end of the link that there is today between the price of gas and the price of electricity, which makes no sense with electrification coming with a Green Deal, because electrification will go up and up and up, and if this is linked to the gas price, it makes no sense. And also the problem was also to have more regulated tariffs, to have a clear direct link between the production cost of electricity and the cost that is paid by consumers. What is the Commission view of this? Is this something that will go also in the toolbox discussion? So will we have a new push in the regulation of the market of electricity? Thank you.
Well, you know that the discussion is ongoing, of course. The reasons for the increase of prices of natural gas are, I think, very, very clear. There is a strong increase of demand, and also it is a consequence of the transition in the energy mix that we have, because gas is used. So we have problem of supply and problems of a demand expanding because of the transition that makes the use of gas for certain countries essential in substitution of coal. These elements connected with also seasonal impacts are in the basis of this high increase of the gas prices. And we know that in several EU countries, the energy mix is not the same in all energy countries. In several EU countries, the gas price has this strong influence. So this will, of course, be part of the discussion prior to our communication, but I don't think that we will have a revolution in our ETS system with this communication. If this is your the question, the answer is that we will provide solutions and, if possible, also original solutions to face these problems that we have in the electricity prices. Then other part of the discussion are relative to the taxonomies that we decided, and how do we deal in these taxonomies with nuclear energy. You know that an assessment is ongoing in the Commission on the subject, and I think that it is a very important assessment. When the assessment will be concluded, I think that it will be made public. There is a commitment from this point of view to update the taxonomies in light of the assessment ongoing also on nuclear energy.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks so much for the floor. Just a question to the Commissioner and the Eurogroup President, if I may. Just to the Eurogroup President, it's not the first time that the Eurogroup will have put out a statement on energy issues. If I'm not mistaken, then there was one in 2008 and one in 2005. Do you envision, because you mentioned not too long ago that you would come back to the issue of inflation and energy prices, I mean, do you imagine coming forward with some sort of communication maybe next month to the Commission that summarizes the Eurozone feeling? And then forgive me, Gentiloni, I will try again on the measures. I know you must be tired of people throwing these questions at you, but you did mention that you would be looking at temporary and targeted measures, which to me seems like you have something in mind. And I don't know if that's specific to, I don't know, helping out, giving a voucher to households that are hardest hit, for example. I'm just wondering if you can give me any detail on that. And then if I could tempt you, Mr. Donahue, just to take off your Eurogroup hat and put on your Irish finance minister's hat again. Your deputy finance minister went on radio today at RTE, and it seems like he was quite happy with a lot of what the new OECD text says. So could I tempt you to give me a flavor about how you feel about the text as its renewed form? Thank you.
For your question, I forgive you, of course. But as you know, that the work is going on. This communication was supposed to be for tomorrow, I think, and now it will be for next week. And this is confirming that there is a lot of work on this. Work is not only, I repeat, because this could be rather easy, on the state of play analysis of the situation and on indication of the tools that member states have with the legislation, with the EU rules. It is only the attempt to identify, if possible, new tools, new initiatives. Also in the discussion that we had today in the Eurogroup, several ministers intervened about issues like common procurement, different initiative of stockage of energy. These processes are not easy solutions, not traditional solutions, and to look to this solution needs, I think, serious attitude and a little bit of time. This is the reason why I presented the possibility that some of these proposals could come before the European Council in the communication of mid-October, and others could come in the energy package that we have in our program for December.
On those two topics. So I'll keep my President of the Eurogroup hat on for the first one. So my understanding is that the statements in 2005 and 2008 were ECOFIN statements rather than Eurogroup statements. But in any event, given that there's a European Council taking place so soon, later on in October, which will be looking to discuss this matter further, I'd imagine all the drafting energies of our colleagues will go into preparing for that meeting rather than an ECOFIN or Eurogroup meeting that will be happening afterwards. I anticipate that the next Eurogroup statement that will take place will be in December. We normally at that point comment on the work of the Commission in relation to the draft budgetary plans, and that will provide an opportunity then for Eurogroup at that point to support the work of the Commission on the budgetary plans and also give us a perspective on our economic performance across the entire year. So, in short, given that we have a summit of the European Council taking place, I think that will be where conclusions on the matter will be reached. And then taking off my Eurogroup hat and going back to the issue of where we are in taxation, as I said earlier on, we have made some progress, but I'll give my final view about where we stand after I've concluded discussions of this week and had an opportunity to brief all Cabinet colleagues on Thursday. After we have that Cabinet discussion, I'll then give a view on behalf of the government and myself about where we stand on the OECD process. Thank you.
And the final question is for Sarah Collins. On Zoom. Sarah? Okay. I don't think she's online, so I guess we'll stop the press conference here. Thank you very much.